The unexpected visitor. The year was 2350, and humanity had come a long way from its days of looking up at the stars in wonder. Earth was no longer a solitary blue planet on the edge of the galaxy but a thriving member of the intergalactic Concord, a coalition of alien civilizations united by fragile alliances and interstellar diplomacy. Despite humanity's advancements, they were still viewed as underdogs in the galactic hierarchy. Many saw them as emotional, chaotic, and dangerously unpredictable. Few outside Earth believed that humans could ever rival the ancient and advanced civilizations of the Concord. Commander Eric Steele was no stranger to such perceptions. As one of Earth's most skilled diplomats, his job was to challenge those views with every mission he undertook. But today's assignment was unlike anything he had faced before. Eric had been summoned to negotiate with the Velani, a reclusive and enigmatic alien species whose mastery of technology and ethereal beauty made them both revered and feared. The Velani were known for their perfection in all things: physical appearance, technological prowess, and emotional discipline. Their crystalline cities floated in the atmosphere of their homeworld, illuminated by a light that seemed to emanate from within their structures. To the Velani, imperfection was an unforgivable flaw, and humanity's messy, emotional nature was the epitome of imperfection. Eric's transport shuttle glided smoothly into the docking bay of the Velani mothership, an enormous structure of shimmering glass and liquid metal that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. As the doors hissed open, Eric straightened his uniform and stepped out, his boots clicking against the polished floor. A group of Velani delegates awaited him, their tall, elegant forms glowing faintly in the artificial light. At their center stood Irina, the youngest of the Velani council members and the one rumored to have called for this meeting. She was a vision of grace, her pale silver skin shimmering like starlight, and her piercing azure eyes scanning Eric with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Her every movement was precise, almost mechanical, yet there was an unmistakable intelligence in her gaze. "Commander Steele," Irina said, her voice melodic yet sharp, like the chime of crystal bells. "Welcome aboard. I hope you understand the gravity of this meeting. The Velani do not extend invitations lightly." Eric nodded, maintaining his calm demeanor despite the weight of her words. "I'm honored to be here, Counselor Irina. Humanity values its relationship with the Concord and seeks to deepen our understanding of all its members, including your esteemed people." Irina tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Understanding? A noble goal, but one that your species often approaches with reckless abandon. Your kind's obsession with chaos and emotion has led to as much destruction as it has progress. Tell me, Commander, what makes you believe that humanity has anything to offer the Velani?" Eric suppressed a smile. He had expected this. "Counselor Irina, humanity's strength lies in its ability to adapt. We may not be perfect, but it's our imperfections that drive us to innovate, to persevere, and to find solutions where none seem possible. We're not bound by rigid traditions or fear of failure. We thrive because we're unafraid to take risks." Irina raised an eyebrow, the faintest flicker of amusement crossing her otherwise serene features. "Bold words, Commander. But words are wind. The Velani deal in actions and results." Eric stepped closer, his confidence unwavering. "Then let me prove it. If you truly believe humanity is inferior, give me a chance to show you what we're capable of." The room grew silent, the tension palpable. The other Velani delegates exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsettled by Eric's audacity. Irina, however, seemed intrigued. She studied him for a moment before speaking. "Very well," she said, her voice laced with challenge. "We Velani have a tradition of trials, tests designed to measure one's worth through intellect, skill, and resolve. If you are so eager to prove your species' value, you will participate in these trials. But know this, Commander Steele, failure will not only reflect poorly on you but on your entire species." Eric's heart raced, but he kept his composure. "I accept your challenge, Counselor Irina. But on one condition." Irina's eyes narrowed slightly. "And what is that?" "That you participate as well," Eric said, his voice firm. "If this is about understanding each other, then it must be mutual. You'll face the trials alongside me." A murmur of shock rippled through the Velani delegation. Never before had a human dared to challenge one of their own in such a manner. Irina's lips curled into a faint smile, the first genuine expression Eric had seen from her. "Very well, Commander," she said, her tone almost playful. "Let us see if your actions match your bravado. The trials will commence at dawn." As Eric was escorted to his quarters, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and dread. He knew the odds were stacked against him. The Vellani were a race of perfectionists, and their trials would undoubtedly be tailored to their strengths. But Eric also knew that humanity's greatest asset was its ability to thrive under pressure. He spent the night preparing, reviewing everything he knew about the Vellani and their methods. The challenges ahead would be unlike anything he had ever faced, but he was determined to rise to the occasion. Failure was not an option, not for him, not for humanity. When dawn arrived, Eric stood at the entrance to the trial chamber, his heart pounding but his resolve unshaken. Irina was already there, her expression calm and confident. She regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and respect, as if seeing him in a new light. "Are you ready, Commander Steele?" she asked. Eric met her gaze, a determined smile on his face. "I've been ready my whole life." With that, the chamber doors opened, revealing the first trial. The room was a vast expanse of shifting terrain, its walls alive with pulsating energy. The challenge was clear: survive and adapt to the environment's ever-changing conditions. As Eric and Irina stepped inside, the chamber shifted around them, the air crackling with energy. Eric took a deep breath, his mind focused on the task ahead. He knew this was more than just a test of skill, it was a battle for humanity's place in the galaxy. And he was ready to fight. A clash of cultures. The Vellani trial chamber was unlike anything Eric Steele had ever encountered. The crystalline walls shimmered with pulsating energy, casting fractured rainbows across the vast arena. The chamber itself was alive, shifting and morphing as though it responded to an unseen heartbeat. It was a manifestation of the Vellani's philosophy: order born from chaos, perfection forged through discipline. Eric stood at the entrance, his sharp eyes scanning the shifting terrain. Beside him, Irina was poised with the grace of a predator, her glowing azure eyes fixed ahead, betraying no emotion. "This is your chance to prove your species' worth, Commander Steele," Irina said, her voice calm but carrying an edge of challenge. "This trial is designed to test adaptability, ingenuity, and resolve, qualities you claim to embody. Let us see if your words hold substance." Eric smirked. "I've never backed down from a challenge, Counselor Irina. But you're in this too. Don't think I've forgotten." The Vellani delegate, observing from above, a towering figure cloaked in shimmering robes, raised a hand, signaling the beginning of the trial. The floor beneath Eric and Irina shifted abruptly, becoming a slick, unstable surface. The air thickened with a low hum, and without warning, the ground splintered into jagged sections, forming islands of solid terrain separated by deep, churning pits of energy. The first challenge: navigate the unstable terrain. Eric lunged forward, his instincts kicking in as a section of ground beneath him began to dissolve. He barely made it to the next stable platform, his boots scraping against its edge. Behind him, Irina moved with eerie precision, her lithe frame gliding across the crumbling terrain as if she were part of the environment itself. "Not bad for a chaotic human," Eric called back, panting slightly as he assessed the next move. Irina didn't respond immediately, her gaze focused on the shifting terrain ahead. "This is a trial of precision and focus. Your tendency to rely on instinct will only get you so far, Steele." Eric chuckled, leaping to another platform. "And your tendency to overthink might leave you stranded." The two continued navigating the terrain, each demonstrating their strengths. Irina's calculated movements allowed her to anticipate shifts in the environment, giving her a steady edge. Eric, on the other hand, thrived in the unpredictability, adapting quickly to the terrain's sudden changes. His resourcefulness began to catch Irina's attention, though she would never admit it aloud. As they neared the center of the chamber, the challenge escalated. Massive crystalline spires erupted from the ground, their surfaces reflecting blinding light as they spun and crashed into the platforms. Eric narrowly avoided being crushed by one, rolling to safety and catching his breath. Irina leaped gracefully over another, landing beside him. "I see why your species survives," she said, her tone begrudgingly impressed. "You're stubborn. And you're not as rigid as you seem," Eric replied, rising to his feet. "Maybe there's hope for teamwork after all." Irina arched an elegant brow but didn't argue. The second challenge, the Gauntlet of Illusions. The terrain stabilized momentarily, and the walls of the chamber dissolved, revealing an endless expanse of mirrored surfaces. Each reflection distorted reality, creating duplicates of Eric and Irina that moved independently. The challenge was clear: identify the true path forward while avoiding the traps hidden within the maze of illusions. Irina moved first, her sharp mind analyzing the patterns and the reflections. "The Vellani designed this to reward discipline," she explained, stepping cautiously into the maze. "If you stray from the correct path, the reflections will." A sudden explosion of light interrupted her as one of Eric's duplicates leaped from the mirrors, attempting to tackle him. Eric sidestepped, delivering a solid punch that shattered the illusion into a cascade of sparkling fragments. "Attack you?" Eric finished for her, brushing off his jacket. "Got it. Let's just call this one an exercise in multitasking." Irina sighed, clearly exasperated. "You're reckless." "And you're welcome," Eric shot back, stepping ahead of her. "Let me try something." He crouched, picking up a shard of the broken illusion and holding it against the mirrored surface. The fragment refracted the light in a specific way, revealing faint lines on the floor leading to a hidden path. "See? Improvisation," Eric said with a grin, tossing the shard to Irina. She caught it, her expression unreadable, but a flicker of acknowledgement passed across her face. Together, they moved through the maze, using Eric's unconventional thinking and Irina's analytical precision to navigate the traps. The further they progressed, the more they relied on each other's strengths, their mutual respect growing with every step. The final challenge: trust under pressure. Reaching the maze's exit, they found themselves in a small, enclosed chamber with a single console at its center. Above them, a countdown timer began to tick down, its ominous red glow filling the room. Irina immediately moved to inspect the console, her fingers gliding over its surface as she analyzed its intricate design. "This device controls the chamber's oxygen levels," Irina said, her voice steady. "If we fail to deactivate it before the timer reaches zero, the air will be vented." Eric frowned, stepping beside her. "What's the catch?" "The interface requires two individuals to operate," Irina replied, pointing to a second console on the opposite side of the room. "The tasks must be performed simultaneously and perfectly synchronized. Even a millisecond of error will result in failure." Eric glanced at her, noting the tension in her usually calm demeanor. "Sounds like a typical Tuesday for me." Irina shot him a look. "This is not a time for jokes, Steele." "I know," Eric said, his tone softening. "But we've got this. Trust me." For a moment, Irina hesitated. Trust was not something the Vellani gave freely, especially not to outsiders. But as she looked at Eric, she saw something in his eyes that made her pause, a determination that was neither reckless nor calculated but deeply genuine. "Very well," she said, taking her position. "Let's begin." The consoles lit up, displaying a series of complex symbols that changed in rapid succession. Eric and Irina worked in unison, matching their inputs to the symbols with precision. The timer continued to tick down, each second a reminder of the stakes. Sweat beaded on Eric's brow as he focused, his hands moving swiftly over the controls. "Almost there," Irina said, her voice strained. "Just keep going," Eric replied, his gaze locked on the console. With only seconds remaining, the symbols aligned, and the consoles emitted a sharp tone. The chamber's red glow shifted to a calming blue, and the countdown timer stopped. They had succeeded. Irina exhaled deeply, her composure momentarily breaking. Eric leaned against the console, catching his breath. For the first time since the trials began, Irina turned to him and extended her hand. "Perhaps I underestimated you, Commander Steele," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Eric shook her hand firmly. "And maybe humanity isn't as chaotic as you thought." The trial chamber dissolved, revealing the Vellani delegation watching silently from above. Their expressions ranged from surprise to quiet approval. The elder raised a hand, signaling the end of the session. This is only the beginning, Irina said as they walked toward the exit. The next trials will be far more demanding. Eric grinned, his confidence unwavering. Good. I wouldn't want it any other way. As they left the arena, side by side, Eric couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. The Vellani might see humanity as flawed, but today he had planted the first seed of doubt. And for Eric Steele, that was enough to keep fighting. The unlikely alliance. The air was thick with tension as Eric Steele and Irina exited the trial chamber, their footsteps echoing in the crystalline corridors of the Vellani mothership. The first trials had tested their physical and mental limits, but the sense of accomplishment was overshadowed by what lay ahead. Eric couldn't shake the feeling that the Vellani were holding back, that the true nature of the trials had yet to reveal itself. Irina walked beside him, her movements precise and controlled as always. Yet something had changed. The cold disdain she had displayed toward him at the start of their encounter had softened into something more complicated. Respect? Curiosity? Even Irina herself wasn't sure. She had never encountered a human like Eric, one who combined relentless determination with such an infuriating disregard for convention. Commander Steele, Irina said, her melodic voice breaking the silence. You've managed to survive thus far, but the next trials will demand more than instinct and improvisation. The challenges ahead will test our ability to work together. Your unpredictability may have served you well, but it cannot be our only strategy. Eric glanced at her, smirking. You say that like I'm a loose cannon. Irina arched a silver brow. Aren't you? Eric laughed, the sound reverberating off the crystalline walls. I like to think of it as adaptable. And if we're being honest, your rigid approach almost got you stuck in that maze back there. Irina's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. She hated to admit it, but Eric's chaotic methods had saved them more than once. His ability to think on his feet was unlike anything she had encountered among her own people, who relied on meticulous preparation and unwavering discipline. Still, she couldn't help but feel uneasy about what lay ahead. The pair arrived at a large, arched doorway etched with intricate patterns that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Irina paused, placing a hand on the glowing surface. The patterns shifted under her touch, rearranging themselves into a complex geometric design. The door groaned open, revealing a vast chamber bathed in an otherworldly glow. The air inside hummed with energy, and the walls pulsed rhythmically, as if the room itself were alive. The challenge of symbiosis. The elder Vellani's voice echoed through the chamber, resonating in Eric and Irina's minds rather than their ears. The next trial will test your ability to function as one. It is a challenge of symbiosis, where success is impossible without complete unity. Enter the chamber and face what awaits. Eric stepped inside, his boots clicking against the smooth, glass-like floor. Irina followed, her gaze scanning the room with analytical precision. At the center of the chamber stood two pedestals, each holding a glowing sphere of energy. A series of intricate pathways spread out from the pedestals, connecting to conduits that ran up the walls and into the ceiling. What do you think? Eric asked, his tone light but his expression serious. Irina studied the setup, her mind racing. The spheres appear to be conduits for the chamber's energy field. If I'm correct, we'll need to activate them simultaneously and maintain the flow of energy through the pathways. Any misstep could overload the system. Eric nodded. Sounds simple enough. Irina shot him a pointed look. It won't be. The pathways are designed to shift and recalibrate based on our inputs. If we're not perfectly synchronized, the energy will destabilize, and the chamber will collapse. Eric frowned, stepping closer to one of the pedestals. No pressure, huh? The trial begins. As they placed their hands on the spheres, the chamber came alive. The pathways began to glow, and streams of energy surged through the conduits. At first, the process seemed straightforward. Eric and Irina moved in tandem, guiding the energy flow with careful precision. But as the pathways began to shift, the challenge escalated. Focus, Steele, Irina said sharply, her tone strained. You're lagging behind. I'm trying. Eric shot back, beads of sweat forming on his brow. These pathways are changing faster than I can keep up. The energy flow faltered, and a sharp jolt of electricity surged through the chamber, causing both of them to stumble. Irina recovered quickly, her movements fluid and controlled. Eric, on the other hand, gritted his teeth and adjusted his approach, leaning into his instinctive adaptability. "Follow my lead," Irina instructed, her voice cutting through the chaos. "No offense, but your lead isn't working," Eric countered. "This isn't just about precision, it's about rhythm. You need to loosen up." Irina glared at him, but the truth of his words was undeniable. She took a deep breath, allowing herself to let go of the rigid control she had been taught to maintain. As she adjusted her approach, their movements began to align more naturally. The pathway shifted again, but this time, Eric and Irina adapted together, their actions fluid and synchronized. The energy flow stabilized, and the conduits hummed with power. For the first time, they moved as one, neither leading nor following but working in perfect harmony. The unexpected twist. Just as they neared completion, the chamber's walls began to pulse erratically. The elder's voice echoed once more, cold and detached. "You have proven capable of unity. Now, let us test its limits." The glowing spheres fractured, releasing tendrils of energy that coiled around Eric and Irina. The tendrils formed a shimmering bridge between them, linking their minds. Eric gasped as an overwhelming rush of foreign emotions flooded his senses: Irina's disciplined focus, her quiet frustration, and the faint flicker of doubt she kept buried beneath her perfect exterior. Irina staggered, her own mind inundated with Eric's chaotic thoughts. She felt his determination, his fear, and his relentless drive to prove himself. It was raw, unfiltered, and utterly alien to her. "Steel," Irina said, her voice trembling slightly. "What is this?" Eric steadied himself, his breathing ragged. "They're forcing us to share everything. Thoughts, emotions, memories. It's invasive." The link between them strengthened, and their thoughts began to blend. For a brief moment, Irina saw herself through Eric's eyes, not as a flawless Vailani but as someone struggling to reconcile duty with curiosity. Eric, in turn, saw the weight of her expectations, the pressure to embody perfection in a world that allowed no room for error. "I didn't realize," Irina whispered, her voice barely audible. Eric managed a faint smile. "Neither did I." Together, they focused on stabilizing the energy once more, their newfound understanding fueling their efforts. The pathways lit up in a brilliant cascade of light, and the chamber fell silent. The trial was complete. A new understanding. As the link dissolved, Eric and Irina stepped back, their gazes meeting in a moment of unspoken acknowledgement. The experience had changed them, forcing them to confront their own vulnerabilities and see each other in a new light. The elder's voice returned, no longer cold but tinged with curiosity. "You have succeeded where many have failed. Perhaps there is more to humanity than we believed." Irina turned to Eric, her expression softer than he had ever seen. "You're not what I expected, Steel." "Perhaps, neither am I." Eric grinned, his confidence returning. "Well, counselor, maybe this is the start of something new." As they left the chamber, side by side, the seeds of an unlikely alliance had been sown. What lay ahead would test them further, but for the first time, Eric and Irina felt they might just stand a chance, together. The cost of defiance. Eric Steele and Irina stepped out of the glowing trial chamber into a narrow crystalline corridor, their footsteps echoing softly. Despite the success of the last trial, the air between them was heavy with unspoken tension. The shared mind link had created a fragile understanding between the human diplomat and the Vailani counselor, but it had also left them vulnerable in ways neither of them had anticipated. As they walked, Eric broke the silence. "That mind link thing back there, it wasn't just a test, was it?" Irina's pace slowed. Her silver hair caught the shifting light of the corridor as she turned to him, her expression unusually hesitant. "No," she admitted, her voice quieter than usual. "The elders use it sparingly, only when they wish to test more than skill. It was meant to expose our true natures, to force us to confront what we hide, even from ourselves." Eric raised an eyebrow. "And did you see what you needed to see?" Irina hesitated, her gaze dropping to the polished floor. I saw enough. He could tell she wasn't ready to share more, so he let it go. For now. The corridor opened into a grand chamber where a delegation of Velani elders awaited them. Their luminous forms towered over Eric, their glowing eyes fixed on him and Irina with an unsettling intensity. The head elder, whose crystalline robe seemed to shimmer with an inner light, stepped forward. Commander Steele, the elder intoned, his voice reverberating in Eric's mind, you have demonstrated an ability to adapt and unite with one of our own. But unity is only one facet of what it means to be worthy. The final trial will test not just your resolve but your loyalty to your kind and to one another. Eric frowned. Loyalty? To one another? He glanced at Irina, whose stoic expression betrayed a flicker of unease. You will see soon enough, the elder replied, his tone cryptic. With a wave of his hand, the chamber around them began to dissolve, replaced by a dark, cavernous space filled with a low, pulsating hum. The trial of loyalty. The trial room was massive, its walls shifting with an otherworldly fluidity. In the center, two platforms rose from the floor, each holding a single artifact, a crystalline orb for Irina and a metallic cube for Eric. Both objects seemed to pulse faintly, emitting a subtle energy that Eric felt in his chest like the beating of a second heart. The elder's voice echoed through the space. Before you lie artifacts tied to your essence. The orb represents Irina's connection to the Velani, her duty and her people's perfection. The cube represents Eric's humanity, his chaotic resilience, and his species' indomitable spirit. A third object descended from above, a swirling, amorphous mass suspended in the air, crackling with unstable energy. The elder continued, this is the anomaly, a destabilizing force that threatens the existence of the chamber and yourselves. To survive, one of you must sacrifice your artifact to stabilize the anomaly. The other will lose their essence forever. The choice is yours. Eric stared at the cube, his jaw tightening. You're asking one of us to give up everything we are. Irina's voice was cold, her disciplined facade slipping back into place. This is a test of loyalty, to our kind and to each other. The elders are watching to see which of us values their own survival over unity. And what happens if we both refuse? Eric asked. The elder's tone turned grave. Then the anomaly will consume you both, and this trial will end in failure. Eric looked at Irina, his mind racing. They had only just begun to work together, but now they were faced with a choice that could unravel everything. He knew what the elders were doing, forcing them to question their alliance, to decide whether they could trust each other with everything on the line. The ticking clock. The anomaly began to pulse more violently, sending waves of energy rippling through the chamber. Eric could feel its heat, its unstable energy gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. Time was running out. Irina, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them, I know what you're thinking. You want to sacrifice your artifact to protect your people's honor. Irina's eyes narrowed. And you would sacrifice yours to uphold humanity's reputation? Eric stepped closer, the heat of the anomaly warming his skin. No. I'd sacrifice mine to save us both. Because this isn't about pride or honor, it's about survival. Irina's expression faltered, her carefully constructed mask cracking. You can't possibly understand what my artifact represents. To destroy it would sever me from my people, my legacy, everything I am. And what happens if you don't? Eric countered, his voice rising. We both die, and all this everything we've done means nothing. What good is your legacy if it ends here? Irina hesitated, the conflict evident in her glowing eyes. For the first time in her life, she was faced with a choice that defied logic, one that required her to trust someone who embodied the chaos her people despised. The decision. As the anomaly flared, Eric took a step toward his artifact. If it means keeping us both alive, I'll do it. Wait. Irina's voice stopped him. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. You can't make this choice for me. Eric looked at her, his expression softening. I'm not. But I need you to know something. Whatever happens, you're not alone in this. We're in it together. Irina's grip tightened, and for a moment, the world seemed to still. She saw the truth in Eric's eyes, a willingness to sacrifice not out of duty, but out of something deeper. Something she had never fully understood, compassion. She turned toward her artifact, her hand trembling as she reached for it. Together, she said quietly. Eric nodded, stepping back to let her decide. Irina placed her hands on the glowing orb, and with a deep breath, she hurled it into the anomaly. The chamber erupted in light, a deafening roar filling the air as the anomaly consumed the artifact. For a moment, Eric thought the energy would consume them both, but then the light faded, and the chamber fell silent. Aftermath. The elder's voice returned, quieter this time. You have chosen well, Irina of the Velani. Sacrificing your essence to preserve unity demonstrates a strength beyond perfection. Humanity has taught you this, a lesson we did not believe possible. Irina looked at Eric, her features softening as she spoke. Perhaps humanity's chaos is not a flaw, but a strength. Eric smiled, exhaustion etched across his face. And maybe perfection isn't so bad after all. The chamber dissolved, and they found themselves back in the grand hall, the delegation of elders watching in contemplative silence. Irina stood straighter, a new resolve in her posture. Eric, despite the trials, felt a growing sense of hope. Together, they had proven something no one had expected, that unity wasn't just a possibility, it was their greatest strength. The trials were not over, but Eric and Irina had forged a bond that no challenge could break. For the first time, they were more than rivals. They were partners. And together, they were ready to face whatever came next. A shared revelation. The crystalline halls of the Velani mothership were unusually quiet as Eric Steele and Irina walked side by side, the echoes of their last trial still ringing in their ears. Irina's sacrifice had shifted the dynamic between them, and for the first time, Eric sensed a glimmer of vulnerability in her otherwise impenetrable demeanor. She had chosen to trust him, to embrace the chaos she had spent her entire life rejecting, and it had saved them both. But the cost of her decision lingered in the air. Do you feel different? Eric asked cautiously, breaking the silence. Irina's steps faltered, her glowing eyes flicking toward him before turning back to the corridor ahead. The orb represented my connection to the Velani, a thread that tied me to our shared perfection, to everything we value as a people. Without it, she paused, searching for the right words. I feel untethered. Free, but also diminished. Eric nodded, his expression thoughtful. Freedom comes with a price. But it also comes with opportunity. Maybe you'll find something new to hold on to. Irina didn't respond, but Eric noticed the faintest flicker of emotion cross her face, something between hope and uncertainty. They continued walking until they reached a chamber Eric hadn't seen before. Its walls shimmered with a fluid light, and the air inside hummed with a faint vibration. At the center of the room was a towering structure, a cylindrical column of translucent material that seemed to pulse with life. Around it, holographic displays projected ancient texts, schematics, and a series of glowing constellations. Irina froze at the sight, her usual composure giving way to wide-eyed shock. What is this place? Eric asked, stepping closer to the column. Irina's voice was barely a whisper. This is the archive. Eric raised an eyebrow. The archive? Irina nodded, her gaze fixed on the glowing column. It contains the collective history of the Velani. Every triumph, every failure, every secret we have ever buried. It is guarded zealously, even from our own people. Only the elders have access. Eric's curiosity flared. And yet here we are. Irina approached the column cautiously, her hand hovering just above its surface. As she made contact, a series of holographic projections flared to life, surrounding them in a cascade of images and data. Eric watched as scenes of Velani history unfolded: wars, discoveries, alliances, and betrayals. The visuals were stunning, but there was a pattern that unsettled him. Wait a second, Eric said, pointing to one of the projections. That looks like human technology. Irina's brow furrowed as she focused on the image, a schematic of a ship that bore a striking resemblance to early human designs. Impossible. The Vellani have never relied on external innovation. Everything we are, we built ourselves. Maybe that's what you've been told, Eric countered, stepping closer to the holograms. But this is from Earth's early spacefaring days. I'd bet my last ration pack on it. Arina's expression hardened. If you're implying that the Vellani... I'm not implying anything, Eric interrupted. I'm just saying the evidence is right in front of us. Maybe your people weren't always as self-contained as they like to claim. Arina's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she waved her hand through the projection, shifting it to reveal more schematics, texts, and recordings. As they dug deeper, a troubling narrative began to emerge. The Vellani, it seemed, had once been explorers, much like humanity. They had formed alliances, shared knowledge, and even relied on other species to achieve their technological advancements. But at some point, they had turned inward, erasing these connections from their official history. They rewrote it all, Arina said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Everything we were, everything we built with others. They erased it to craft an illusion of perfection. Eric folded his arms, his expression grim. Sounds familiar. Histories written by the victors, Arina. Or in this case, the ones who wanted control. Arina stared at the holograms, her mind racing. If the elders have hidden this from us, what else have they buried? The confrontation. Before they could delve further, a sharp, resonating voice filled the chamber. You should not be here. Eric and Arina turned to see a group of elders standing at the entrance, their luminous forms glowing brighter than ever. The head elder stepped forward, his expression unreadable but his voice heavy with authority. Arina of the Vellani, you have overstepped your bounds. The archive is not meant for those who question their place. Arina straightened, her gaze defiant. You told us the trials were about unity, about proving our worth. But now I see the truth. You weren't testing us, you were trying to keep us blind to what we once were. The elder's glow intensified, his tone sharp. And what do you think you have uncovered, Arina? That we were once like them? He gestured toward Eric with disdain. Chaotic, vulnerable, flawed? We cast aside those weaknesses to become what we are today, unassailable. But at what cost? Arina countered, her voice rising. You've stripped us of our history, our identity. We were more than what you've reduced us to. Eric stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. You're afraid. You've built this idea of perfection so high that anything that challenges it feels like a threat. But perfection isn't strength, it's a cage. Humanity isn't perfect, but we thrive because we embrace what makes us different. Maybe it's time you did the same. The elder's gaze bore into Eric, but he didn't waver. Finally, the elder turned back to Arina. You have a choice, Arina. Denounce this human and his influence, or face exile. There is no middle ground. Arina's choice. Arina's heart pounded as the weight of the elder's ultimatum settled over her. Exile was the ultimate disgrace among the Vellani, a fate worse than death. But the thought of denouncing Eric, of turning her back on the truth they had uncovered, felt equally unbearable. I won't denounce him, Arina said finally, her voice steady. And I won't deny what I've seen. If that means exile, so be it. The chamber fell silent. The elders stared at her, their glowing forms flickering as if shaken. Finally, the head elder spoke, his tone laced with finality. So be it. With a wave of his hand, the projections vanished, and the room plunged into darkness. When the light returned, Eric and Arina found themselves standing alone, the entrance to the archive sealed behind them. Eric turned to Arina, his expression a mix of admiration and concern. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Arina replied, her voice resolute. Because you were right. Freedom comes with a price. And it's one I'm willing to pay. As they walked away from the archive, Eric couldn't help but feel a surge of respect for Arina. She had risked everything to stand by the truth, to stand by him. Together, they had uncovered a secret that could change the course of Vellani history. The question now was whether they could survive long enough to share it.